I work the late shift at a haunted fast food joint. My customers are the undead. I never should have opened that door. The flickering neon lights hung outside like ghostly sentinels, casting shadows that danced along the cracked pavement. It was a graveyard shift at the old fast food joint. I was used to the smells of greasy fries and cleaning chemicals, but tonight, the air was thick with something I couldn't name. I took my usual spot behind the counter, but dread settled in my chest like a stone. As I clocked in, I noticed the strange silence that wrapped around the place. My coworker, a guy named Mark, had gone home. I was left alone. Every corner seemed darker than usual, whispers butting into the periphery of my hearing. I shook off the cold sweat beading on my brow. Just your imagination, I told myself. But then, the noise started. A faint tapping, like fingernails against glass. I looked around, but no one was there. Just the broken flickers of the fluorescent lights overhead. The darkness pressed against the walls, creeping closer like a shadow with intentions. I rubbed my arms, trying to ease the chill that had settled deep in my bones. The menu board hung weirdly still. Sometimes it felt like it was watching me. Get it together, I mumbled, forcing my muscles to relax. I leaned against the counter, the cold plastic biting into my skin. Moments passed, unspooling into something like eternity. I could hear the faint hum of the freezers, whirring like a ghostly lullaby. Then I heard a voice, a low, raspy whisper. "Help me." The hairs on my neck stood up, my heart slammed against my ribcage. "Who is there?" I called out, my voice trembling. Silence answered me, and I was suddenly very aware of how alone I was. Suddenly, the cash register slammed open, the drawers spilling change across the counter. A dark rustling echoed from the bathroom. I shot a glance toward it. The door stood ajar. A fragment of my mind screamed to run, but my feet felt glued to the ground. My breath quickened, the cool air clawing at my throat. We're not supposed to be haunted, not here, not at this greasy place. The atmosphere thickened as I crept closer. Shadows played tricks on my eyes, creeping dread pulsating with every step. In the bathroom, the lights flickered like a pulse, a heartbeat echoing my own. I peeked inside, the silence wrapping around me. The bathroom mirror reflected nothing but the void. My reflection stared back, wide-eyed and terrified. And then I saw something moving behind me, a dark figure lingering at the edge of the doorway. A rush of wind rushed by, and just like that, a chill enveloped me. I spun around, but nothing was there. Only darkness, thick and all-consuming. My heart thundered in my chest, panic rising like bile in my throat. "Hello?" I tried to sound brave, but my voice cracked. The figure loomed just outside the edge of my sight, a whisper that seemed to echo straight from the grave. I wanted to scream. I felt it rising, clawing at my insides, but I held it back, trembling like a leaf. Suddenly, the front door swung open and slammed shut. I jumped, my pulse racing. Was it the wind? Or something worse? I stumbled back, dread washing over me like a frigid tide, every instinct screaming to flee. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The shrieking hinges of the door still echoed in my ears as I fought the urge to bolt for the exit. Instead, I forced my feet to take a hesitant step towards the entrance. The shadows inside felt much deeper now, as if something unfathomable waited just beyond them, silently savoring my fear. "Hello?" I tried once more, my voice barely rising above a whisper. "Is anyone here?" The only response was the rhythmic hum of the freezers, their drone morphing into an agonizing wail that dug deeper into my psyche. I glanced back toward the bathroom, its doors swinging slightly as if inviting me in. The flickering lights inside seemed to pulse with a rhythm all their own, beckoning me closer while sparking the temperature around me to plummet. I wasn't alone. I was never alone. Against all instinct, I stepped away from the safety of the counter and into the suffocating haze of uncertainty. As I walked, A slow creak sounded from the back of the building where the deliveries were stored. It sounded like someone was there, someone heavy, dragging something on the tiled floor. A slither of ice wrapped around my spine. "Mark?" I called again in a strained voice, the name spilling from my lips without thought. It felt sacrilegious, like an invocation into the unknown. I moved silently, drawn not because of curiosity but from an indescribable compulsion, the need to confront whatever terror lurked behind those closed doors. Each step felt like wading through molasses. The hallway leading to the storage room had darkened further, the dim lights overhead flickering weakly. Suddenly, a rancid smell washed over me, something akin to rotten meat and decaying metal. It intertwined with the steam rising from the kitchen, creating an unbearable stench. My stomach turned, yet I pressed forward that I paused at the heavy door that led to the storage room, my breath quickening, my hands trembling against the cold, unyielding surface. More noises sprang from within, sickening, wet sounds that gnawed at my sanity. Squinting through the small window set into the door, I felt the hot breath of terror on the back of my neck. And then I saw it, a figure huddled in the darkness, its back turned to me. Shadows hung around it, thick and oppressive. I wanted to believe it was just some leftover stock, a mishap from an earlier delivery. But deep down I knew. "Who is there?" I managed to croak, my throat dry and swollen. The figure stilled, sensing my presence, then turned slowly, inhumanly, as if it knew I was watching. The dim light caught in its eyes hollow, pitted sockets instead of pupils, machinations of something that had long since abandoned the living. Dread sank into my gut as I stumbled backward, my flight instinct rising unbidden. Before I could turn to run, the storage door slammed open, nearly knocking me off my feet. I found myself face to face with the grotesque figure, twisted and wrong, a mockery of life. Its mouth opened impossibly wide, letting out a moan that vibrated through my bones. "Help me! Help me!" It rasped, the voice like shards of glass scraping against stone. That I bolted into action, adrenaline surging through me as I raced down the dark hall toward the front. Behind me, the shuffling footsteps of the creature echoed, growing louder, heavier. My chest tightened with fear as I neared the entrance, praying for salvation. But as I reached for the door, the lights above flickered violently, plunging me into total darkness. All at once, the atmosphere shifted, the air growing thick and oppressive. Something cold wrapped around me, icy fingers creeping along my skin. I could hear the ragged breath of what was once human just behind me. The moment I gripped the door handle, it turned against my will, locking me in place. I spun around, and there, emerging from the depths of the darkness, was a swarm, countless figures wailing, their twisted faces shapeless and blurred, reaching for me with ghostly fingers that I felt their hands clawing at my clothes, pulling me back toward the shadows. Their anguished cries filled the air, drowning out my panic. "Stay with us," they wailed, "stay forever." With a surge of desperation, I broke free from their grasp and threw my body against the door with all of my might. In a burst of primal instinct, the door flew open, and I stumbled outside into the cold night air. But as I turned to flee, a realization hit me like a brick. My escape was only beginning. The parking lot was empty, but something sinister loomed on the far side, two gleaming eyes staring back at me from the darkness. I suddenly wished it had been the undead haunting the fast food joint. "Help me," they whispered, a voice in unison that echoed in my mind. Something in me recognized that this was not just a plea, but a sinister invitation. A dark reality hung in the air as the shadows around the walls elongated, stretching toward me with the fervor of the outstretched hands of the damned. And in that moment, as the cold realization surged through me like a horrifying jolt, I understood I had become a part of them, tethered to this horrid place, destined to serve. The truth of my nightmares settled around my heart like a familiar dread, and I could only watch in horror as my own reflection emerged in the deep black of the night, a sinister smile curling upon my lips. Then there was silence, and the eyes blinked. The darkness began to encroach. The ice in my veins felt alive, writhing as I turned back toward the entrance of the fast food joint. The headlights of an invisible car flickered in the distance, blinding my vision as the world around me dimmed. My mind raced, desperate for clarity amidst the unsettling haze of reality. The stillness was unbearable, every moment thick with the weight of dread that churned in my gut. It was not over. I was bound to something darker and far more sinister. The floor behind me creaked, and against my better judgment, I glanced back. The horrors I had just escaped surged forward in my memory. The twisted figures, their shattered forms reaching out for my existence with souls tethered to this realm. Yet, that gaze, their need for companionship, clawed at my thoughts, intertwining with my fears. They were calling to me, beckoning, and deep down, a part of me began to respond. Suddenly, a shriek pierced the stagnant air, and I spun around just in time to see the flicking signs on the building short circuit, flames dancing along the edges of the fast food sign illuminating the horror inside. Shadows spilled out from the broken window frames, wretched and alive, pulling at the darkness that stretched endlessly beyond the asphalt. "Help me!" A voice echoed, drenched in agony. Despite every instinct screaming at me to run, I turned back, compelled by an unseen force. What needed help? Was it the grotesque figure in the storage room? Or were these cries simply the lingering echoes of the tortured souls clawing at the edge of reality? The question burned in my mind as I took one cautious step forward, the shadows swirling around me like hungry serpents. Suddenly, I was jolted back not by fear, but by a vision so vivid it felt real, as though the threads of time had unraveled just for me to see. I witnessed flickering images of the fast food joint in full swing. Employees laughing, customers indulging in greasy meals, children playing in the cramped space. Their happiness felt distinctly wrong amidst the haunting shadows that lurked just beyond the light, a juxtaposition of normalcy and horror that resonated in my very core. My heart raced as I realized this was not just a glimpse into the past, but a harbinger of what had happened. The sudden crash of a door slamming in the darkness sent me jolting out of my reverie. With renewed panic, I sprinted back toward the entrance, desperation propelling my legs. But as I reached the threshold, a sickening sensation overwhelmed me, the certainty that my time was running out. The shadows were heavy now, real as the flesh on my bones, curling around my ankles with icy tendrils. My mind flashed to the facility's layout, a small back door. Perhaps it connected to the outside world. Just as I grabbed the knob, a bone-chilling scream erupted from within. It was unmistakably Mark, his voice rising above the terror like a beacon. In one savage moment of clarity, I knew I had no choice. I had to help him or join the throng of the damned. "Mark!" I cried, my voice echoing through the empty parking lot, warped by the shadows. I threw myself into the belly of the beast again, careening back inside, where the darkness felt alive and awaited my return with palpable anticipation. Leaning into my raw fear, I felt a pulse of strength surge within me. Each echo of Mark's scream propelled me deeper, navigating through long-forgotten memories strung across this nightmarish labyrinth. The stench became unbearable as I neared the source, the flickering neon light above the kitchen swinging wildly, as if anticipating a storm. And just as I crossed the threshold into the back area, I could see him that he was slumped against the wall, expression twisted in agony. All around him, the figures drifted like smoke, their faces contorted into nightmares I could hardly bear to grasp. They hovered around him, their fingers clawing closer, eager to draw him into their eternal despair, a vortex of lost souls. "Go," he rasped, the words torn from his throat. "You have to," but before he could finish, shadows erupted like a tidal wave, unending, consuming, relentless. I threw myself toward him, adrenaline fueling my every nerve. I extended my hand, reaching for him even as warmth surrounded me like a blanket, drowning out the bitter chill of reality and pulling me toward an edge I could not see. Everything went dark, my lungs burned, and I fought through the smothering grip of the shadows. Time blurred as I felt an unyielding force tugging on my spirit, pulling me deeper into where the screams of the damned became one with my own cries. It was a cacophony of anguish, despair, a chorus echoing through eternity, and then I blinked, suddenly illuminated by an eerie glow. I found myself in a completely different realm, the restaurant gone, replaced by an infinite landscape of twisted shapes and bleeding colors. A whisper brushed against my ear, familiar yet haunting, "Now you belong to us, forever." In that moment, I felt every haunted soul pressing against me, intertwining with my very existence, their laughter and cries surging into an excruciating orgasm of emotion. All hope had slipped through the cracks of my fingers like sand, and when I looked down, appalled and horrified, I saw in my hands the translucent skin, phantom-like yet strangely familiar. The world around me faded to a blurred abyss, as the cacophony of tormented souls welcomed me home, and the last glimmer of light dissolved into nothingness. "Welcome back," they whispered in unison, and deep within me, a sinister smile began to curl on my lips again. A sharp jolt pulled me back, shaking me from the spectral embrace that threatened to engulf my very being. I gasped, struggling for breath, destabilized in a realm so vivid, yet entirely void of reality. The cacophony faded for a moment, only to be replaced by an alarming stillness. It was as if the thousands of wails and whispers paused to assess my return, a collective breath held in anticipation that I blinked, attempting to gather my thoughts, fighting through the haze of that suffocating void. The ground beneath me was no longer solid. It undulated like a restless organism. It was warm, sticky, and the air was thick with a rancid, sweet scent that reminded me disturbingly of burnt flesh. My hands no longer mere specters, but flesh returned to an unspeakable reality, twitched with a mixture of fear and revulsion that I was back, but the restaurant was gone. The shadows twisting around me morphed into grotesque shapes, their features blending into grotesque, writhing patterns, tormented faces with mouths agape, silent screams flaring in the darkness. They shifted in agonizing rhythm, drawing ever closer, their discordant dance a sinister welcome. Panicking, I stumbled backward, a sense of impending doom seeping into my bones. Each scrabble of my foot against the ground sent out ripples that reverberated through the twisted existence I found myself in. Memories, weighed down by the horror of what I had endured, slammed against my psyche. Mark's agony, those haunting figures. I had not found escape. I had unwittingly wandered deeper into their domain. As I turned, desperately searching for any sign of the familiar, those mocking whispers returned, wrapping around me like thin, icy fingers. "You shouldn't have come here, dear." A voice that sounded like my own echoed from all directions. Chills surged up my spine. It felt less like a warning and more like an invitation. "Help!" I screamed, bewildered and frightened, my voice barely a fragment of the cacophony that surrounded me. But the shadows only laughed, a high-pitched cacophony that ricocheted off the unseen walls of this hell. They began converging, the air thickening with palpable malice. Out of that swirling abyss, a figure emerged, one not entirely unlike myself, but unmistakably altered. Its eyes glimmered with a knowledge that sent dread cascading through my heart. "Welcome, sister," it said, its voice smooth like velvet yet steeped in darkness. "You've crossed the threshold. There's no turning back now." I staggered away, frantically searching for an escape while clutching the remnants of my sanity. I could feel my blood run cold, the heat of the tormented souls pulsing around me with an insatiable hunger, but I refused to succumb. "No, I'm not one of you," I shouted, determination warming my voice. "Ah, but your heart beats with their rhythm now," the doppelganger asserted, stepping closer until only inches separated us. Its smile widened, revealing too many teeth, a grim parody of kindness. "Join us. Embrace the darkness, for it calls to you." I had seen this figure before, a resemblance I couldn't quite articulate. An old friend, perhaps, or a part of me long forgotten. "I want tea," I screamed again, though my heart quaked under the strain of the confrontation. The shadows answered with a collective pulse, the ground beneath me trembled, and waves of unearthly energy surged forward. It was as if the darkness sensed my defiance and chose that moment to retaliate, hundreds of hands clawing at my legs, pulling me down. "Join us," they chorused, the twisted faces now blending into a single visage of despair. "No," I cried out once more, using the last of my strength to break free from their grasp. I shoved through the relentless tide of darkness, the realm of the dead swirling past me. Somewhere in my mind, I thought of Mark, of his face, buried beneath the weight of malevolence. Had he joined them? Had he become one of those shadows that haunted the periphery? Panic surged again, and as I fought against the encroaching tendrils of despair, a sudden faint light flickered far in the distance, illuminating the chaos around me. Hope ignited within, enough to push against the darkest lure of those cursed shadows. But the doppelganger gripped my arm tightly, its voice biting and sharp like shards of glass. "You can't leave. You're already one of us." With one final desperate tug, I broke free, tearing away from its grasp. I raced toward the light, the shadows screaming, furious at my escape, clawing until they erupted in violent fury. As I surged forward, I could almost feel their malevolence slamming against me like icy waves, and the air crackled with their rage. But as I approached the light, my heart began to sink. The laughter faded, replaced by a grave silence. The glimmer ahead morphed, revealing shattered illusions and entrance into yet another abyss, an endless cycle of doom. And then, as I stood at the precipice, fear froze me in place. Emerging from the deep shadows behind me, with eyes filled with a knowing darkness, was Mark, but it was not him. The twisted, mutilated reflection wore my friend's face, but his expression was one of haunting betrayal. "Why didn't you save me?" he asked, a choked sob betraying his torment as the darkness swallowed him whole. That moment, the ground fissured beneath me. I stumbled, abruptly dragged back into the void, and the sounds of swirling shadows roared in a symphonic climax, a cacophony heralding the end of my choice. "Choose now," the chorus shrieked, their grasp tightening as the chasm beckoned me closer. And as the abyss opened its maw wide to devour me, I understood the insidious truth: there was no way out. I was trapped. The fast food joint had claimed me, and with one horrified realization, I knew the dead were beckoning not just for companionship, but for my very soul. "Welcome back," they wailed again, as my screams melted into the shadows that I was not the only one lost, and the darkness was hungry. The atmosphere thickened, a palpable dread squeezing any vestige of hope from my chest. I found myself caught between the remnants of a tangible past and the insatiable hunger of a relentless void. Each pulse of darkness seeped into my bones, tempting me with the warmth of belonging and the sweet embrace of oblivion. I wrestled the agony of those anguished whispers swirling around me, the sound like a chorus of lost souls, each imbuing my surroundings with palpable despair. "Help me," a voice implored softly from the darkness, drawing my attention. I turned, desperate for a sign of human connection. The flickering light waned behind me, casting long shadows that seemed to consume everything they touched. "Please." My heart raced as I peered into the depths, where I spotted a figure, just faintly illuminated, a pale shape clawing at the dirt ground, face turned away from me. "Who is it?" I called, my voice cracking amid the cacophony. "I can help you." "Help?" The figure turned, revealing sunken eyes that sparkled with unfathomable sorrow. Familiar features emerged. The face was that of my sister, Sarah, just as I remembered her, but twisted by anguish. "Why did you leave me?" "No," I screamed, recoiling in horror. Sarah had been gone for years, swallowed up in a tragedy that I never truly understood, the details too raw, too painful to confront. And yet, here she was, a reflection of my own guilt and despair. Around her swirled the shadows, drawn to her like moths to a flame. "Help me," she repeated, voice tremulous, a sickening resonance with the whispers around me. The shadows edged closer, ready to consume the last remnants of her life force. I took a step back, heart pounding. "You're not her. You're a trick of the darkness." But the regret crept like a parasite into my mind. What if she was real? What if I could pull her back from the void? "Sarah, I'm so sorry. Why did you leave me to die?" she interrupted, her eyes glimmering with pleading desperation. "Will you let me go like the others? Or will you save me?" Shadows reeled around her, twisting toward me with insatiable longing, thick like a blanket of dread suffocating the hope in my heart. You can't trust them." The truth collided with my sense of morality. I wouldn't they were the harbingers of despair, pulling at those I lost one last time. "Join us, sister," came the voices of the dead, a chorus too sweet to resist, blending with the echoes of my past. "Help her," they cooed, wrapping around my mind like a cool fog, pulling it toward the darkness. "No," I howled, the rage flaring and burning inside me like fire against water. "You can't have her." I lunged forward in defiance, grasping for the illusion of Sarah, hoping against hope that I could wash away the darkness mingling within her. As my hand reached out, I felt the chill of the void lashing against me, gripping my wrist with icy fingers. The shadows unleashed a howling cacophony of laughter, shadows elongating into sinister shapes, morphing into memories of those I had lost. My mother's face slid in and out, a fleeting image of warmth crushed beneath the weight of nostalgia. "What's this?" The doppelganger's voice echoed behind me, sultry and dripping with malice. "You wish to save what has already gone. Sarah was never intended for this realm. Neither were you." I whipped around, my stare locking with that of the thing wearing Sarah's face. Its eyes twisted into the black abyss, revealing the multitude of cries coursing beneath its surface. "You're wrong," I gasped, taking another step forward, despite the danger looming all around. "I still have the strength to fight." Suddenly, the shadows roared, enraged at my defiance. They surged, a tide rolling back against me with a menacing rippling sound that echoed like thunder. The laughter became maddening, snapping at my sanity, drowning out my thoughts in a drowning rush. The space around me twisted, bending like the distorted reflections on a funhouse mirror until it felt as if I stood on the precipice of an unfathomable void. In an act of desperation, I lunged for Sarah. Her form shimmered and distorted, a mirage on the edge. I clutched her arm, but as my fingers closed around her flesh, the boundaries of reality disintegrated. "Please," Sarah's voice pleaded, mingling with all the others, now screaming in anguish. Suddenly, she dissolved into a storm of shadow faces morphing before me as the darkness ripped her away. The ground trembled violently beneath my feet, and I felt myself unmooring, the fabric of the world unraveling in a palpable wave of despair. "Join us," they shrieked, the shadows howling in triumphant glee, their hunger insatiable and reflexive, as they tugged me into their dark embrace. At that moment, everything exploded into blinding light, brighter than I ever imagined, crashing into my surroundings, a clash of worlds so great that the shadows shrieked, their cries filling my ears. As the brilliance gave way to a desolate twilight, I found myself gazing down a long, dilapidated hallway, walls adorned with garish, peeling posters, whispering ancient secrets of another era. I stumbled down the corridor, disoriented, confounded by the illogic of my surroundings. With every step, it deepened, a growing dread wrapped around me, coiling tighter with each labored breath, and there it was, the flickering of a neon sign reading "Open 24 hours." It sent icy fingers through me as the familiar rancid scent of fast food hit my nostrils. The door creaked open, revealing a kitchen frozen in time, but as I tiptoed inside, it was clear that I was not alone. Behind the counter stood an array of unsettling figures, their backs turned, shrouded by greasy aprons. Heads tilted as if they had heard my approach. Without turning, they murmured in unison, "Welcome home." A feeling of dread coursed through me as I realized their faces reflected one thing, the very same reflections of the souls I thought I had left behind. The door slammed shut behind me, darkening my vision just as I felt the shadows creeping, tender and familiar, reaching out in longing. And then one of the figures turned, the flicker of the neon light revealing a chilling smile echoing that of my sister, Sarah, her hollow eyes shimmering with unholy delight. "Welcome back to the restaurant," she said, as the ghosts materialized and the darkness engulfed me once more. "Now it's your turn to join us." The intertwining sense of burnt fries and grease clung to the air, enveloping me like a heavy fog that clawed at my senses. I shivered involuntarily, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead casting a sickly hue on the scene before me, where shadows danced and flickered, shifting in tandem with the dying neon glow of "Open 24 hours." Frozen in place, I grappled with the crushing weight of realization. I had not escaped the void after all. The faces behind the counter glanced over their shoulders one by one, revealing the unsettling mixture of beloved and lost Sarah, my mother, and other familiar countenances twisted by time and sorrow. The enchantment of their smiles quickly morphed into something sinister, laden with expectancy. "Do you see, dear brother?" Sarah spoke first, her voice seductively sweet, yet twisted with malice. "You never left us behind. You were always meant to come back. To serve." The voices erupted in a symphony of echoing laughter, filling the dimly lit kitchen with an intensity that made my pulse race. I felt a strange tugging at my heart, a compelling need to join them, to succumb to this reckless abandon of reality. No, this can't be happening. I stumbled back, my foot knocking against something solid. I glanced downward to see a box marked human remains. Bile rose in my throat. This wasn't just a fast food joint. It was a graveyard of souls imprisoned in twisted servitude, feeding off their despair. You'll make a fine addition to the family, one of the figures, an indistinct man with soulless eyes, said, stepping forward, his face now disturbingly recognizable as an old friend who had vanished under mysterious circumstances. The shadows flickered around him, as if tasting his despair. You'll learn to love the late shift, just as we do. Emotions surged inside me, anger, grief, and escalating terror mingled into a storm that threatened to drown me. I'll never serve you, I shouted, but my voice resounded weakly in the merciless cacophony of their laughter, seemingly feeding the darkness that wrapped its tendrils around my feet, pulling me closer. Suddenly, a loud clang echoed from the kitchen doorway, sending a jolt through the air. I spun around, desperate as an icy tendril slithered up my leg. A delivery box sprawled across the threshold, its contents spilling out with a gruesome thud. A collection of decayed limbs and hollow, vacant eyes stared back at me. The figures turned as one, their gnashing teeth revealed with a feral hunger. Feed them, Sarah cried, a manic glint lighting her sunken eyes. They are starving. Serve, and you can be free. Panic surged through me. I backed away from the grisly sight, hands up in defense. No, I want to do it. I refuse. But the shadows were insatiable. They surged forward, pushing me toward the counter where vicious laughter erupted all around. My feet stumbled over one another, screaming at me to flee, but as I turned away, the way behind me twisted into an impenetrable dark void, taunting my hope of escape. Time us up, Sarah hissed, her voice now grotesquely layered, the familiar comfort replaced with jagged edges of malice. We've been waiting so long for you to join the final shift. When I pressed my back against the counter in desperation, my hand brushed against something cool and metallic. I looked down to find a knife, vibrant against the sea of yellowed grease that captured its glint. The choice hung before me, a horrific paradox. Could I sacrifice this part of myself to stave off the inevitable? The figures began to shuffle closer, joy radiating from their hollow forms as they approached, whispering incantations that drove spikes of fear into my heart. Laughter spiraled into a frenzied crescendo, and in that moment, surrender dangled before me, tempting me to embrace the shadows. Join us, brother, Sarah beckoned, her mouth twisting into a wide, inviting grin. Or you can end your suffering here. Choose quickly. My breath quickened. Time slipped away like ash through my fingers as their hungry eyes consumed me, the shadows inching closer, urging me on with promises of who I once was. I could feel their pleas mingling with my own desires for redemption that I grasped the knife tightly, trembling. Would this be the weapon I'd use to escape, or would it lead me further into the darkness? And then the floor quaked violently, slipping under the weight of a haunting presence rising from the shadows. A figure, larger and more imposing than the others, began to coalesce from the dark abyss, an effigy of everything I feared. With a bone-chilling voice, deeper and more resonant than any I had known, it whispered, "You cannot escape your fate. This is only the beginning." The ground cracked wide open as I felt the shadows surge, the figures closing in around me. My fingers tightened around the knife, trembling with dread as I struggled between life and the insatiable darkness, knowing that in moments the decision would be made for me. And then, just as everything seemed destined to come crashing down into eternal night, I felt a rush of air as the doors burst open behind me, revealing the blinding illumination of starlight cascading within, illuminating a truth far darker than even the shadows that sought to devour me. The blinding starlight flooded the fast food joint, momentarily dissipating the shadows that had pressed in on me. It illuminated the twisted faces of the figures before me, casting them into stark relief. Their eyes glinted in the light, and for a heartbeat, I could almost perceive the remnants of humanity buried beneath the layers of decay and despair. As I squinted against the brilliance, I noticed the figure emerging from the shadows, towering, shrouded in an almost tangible darkness. Its features were indiscernible, but its presence was overwhelmingly malicious, gnawing at the very fabric of my sanity. I could feel the cold weight of dread building within me, a fear so profound it felt as though it were unfurling tendrils around my heart. "Do you see, little brother?" the giant murmured, its voice a guttural melody that vibrated through the floor beneath me. It took a lumbering step closer, and with it, the temperature plummeted, the air thickening with foreboding. "Every specter here has a part to play, even you. This is not merely a shift, it's a cycle." Behind me, the starlight flickered as if struggling against an unseen force, the joy of illumination marred by an encroaching shadow that sought to suffocate it. The shadows at the counter leaned in, their grotesque laughter mingling with the giant's whisper. "You think you can escape? You're already bound by the shackles of your choices." Heartbeat racing, I fought against the lethargy creeping into my limbs. Nothing felt real, and every time I met their mocking gazes, I was reminded of the warmth of the world in contrast to this shattered reflection of it. With another jolt, I recalled the knife still gripped tightly in my hand. Could it save me, or was it yet another instrument of their twisted game? The laughter swelled, echoing through the walls, reminding me of the lives that had come and gone in this purgatorial place. Each soul, shackled like mine, waiting for their servings of despair to be fulfilled. They had all once been vibrant, and now they were contorted into caricatures of their former selves, gluttonous and hollow. "Join us," the figures pleaded, and with those words, I felt myself drifting closer to the brink of acceptance. "You can't deny your fate. Embrace the late shift with us, free of your burdens." The ground trembled again, and the giantess face contorted into a grotesque smile. "Savor your choice, each morsel delicious, each moment a gift." It raised a shadowy hand, its fingers curling like claws. I heard a distant sound, a siren wailing somewhere far off, cutting through the madness like a beacon. The longing surged within me, desperate for connection, for escape. Behind me, the doors still stood ajar, the starlight pulsating in invitation, as if it might grant salvation if only I had the courage to embrace it. "No," I roared, channeling whatever strength I could muster, pointing the knife at the assembling abyss. "I refuse to be a part of this. I choose to break the cycle." The laughter halted, replaced by a thick, ominous silence that settled over us like a shroud. The figures halted, their unholy anticipation palpable as they held their breath, waiting for the inevitable conclusion to my defiance. The giant slowly lowered its hand, its shadows swirling with violent agitation, as though the very act of resisting their designs had become a form of sacrilege. "Very well," it rasped. "You've chosen your path, but bear this in mind, we can be patient, and we love to play." And before I could react, the giant lunged, shadows erupting from the ground like a rushing tide, ensnaring my feet, dragging me toward the center of an unholy ritual. In that one heartbeat before the clutches of darkness enveloped me, I glimpsed a figure emerging from the depths, the echoes of familiar screams ringing in my ears as the darkness peeled back like a layer of skin, revealing a deeper horror nested within. The blood-curdling laughter rose once more, but this time, I felt the vibrations rooting themselves in my bones, consuming my will. I looked into the swirling void, where the essence of despair morphed into unspeakable figments that tore at the edges of my mind. Before I could scream, something icy gripped my heart, claws of fate dragging me into the infamous late shift I had fought against so desperately. And then, with a thunderous reverberation, the lights flickered and went out, plunging me into an all-consuming darkness as the last remnants of starlight flickered away, leaving me locked in an endless abyss with my encroaching fate. "Welcome to your true self," the giant whispered, its laughter dissolving into the quiet of the void, "where your service never ends." The darkness wrapped around me, a suffocating blanket that seemed to ripple with something alive and malevolent. I was no longer in the fast food joint. I was adrift in a formless void, the stench of rotten grease and despair morphing into something sweetly intoxicating yet maddeningly grotesque. My senses were heightened yet dulled, as if they were trapped between two worlds, one that promised escape and another that lured me into the abyss. Floating in this inky expanse, I could hear whispers coiling around me like smoke. their words fragmented, haunting echoes of past souls lost to the shadows of the late shift. Endless service embrace, serve us. They ebbed and flowed through the stillness, chilling me to my core. Each syllable resonated with a deep hunger, an insatiable craving for something I couldn't quite discern my essence. My sanity? I strained against the rising tide of nihilism pooling in my stomach, my fingers tightening around the knife that felt strangely foreign in my grip. It shone faintly in the dark, an echo of the starlight that had been extinguished moments earlier. I called upon that dying spark, willing it to guide me through the encroaching gloom. With every ounce of willpower, I willed the shadows to reveal their secrets, to loosen their grip on my racing heart. Then, amid the chaos of despair, a pinprick of light pierced the obscurity, flickering like a dying star. As I focused on it, memories surged back, faces of those who had succumbed to the dark embrace of the joint, the banshee-like customer with the hollow eyes, the man in the corner booth who drooled into his lap, and the terrified souls who had walked in, only to become mere husks of their former selves. The light grew, and suddenly, my feet were firm on the ground, a warped tile floor of the fast food joint, stained with decades of spilt dreams and despair. The hushed laughter had dulled, and as I quickly scanned the room, I found myself surrounded by the same grotesque figures, now more defined and menacing. Welcome back, the giant's voice coiled around me again, reverberating through my bones as it emerged from the shadows behind the counter. Did you enjoy your little excursion? I swallowed hard, gripping the knife tighter. I want to be part of your games. Let me go? I choose freedom. The figures responded with a collective hiss, their forms quivering in outrage, faces twisting into masks of agony. Freedom? The giant bellowed, echoing absurdity with a hint of incredulity. You truly believe that is your birthright? As the giant took a step forward, its shadow unfurling to envelop me, I felt an icy hand upon my shoulder. I whipped around, knife ready, only to find a customer from the past, the girl who had come in last week, her laughter cut short like a fading note. Now, her face was a ghastly mask of sorrow, eyes weeping a slow stream of blackened tears. I was wrong to stay, she whispered, her voice frail yet piercing, and now I'm bound here, entrapped in their gluttonous want. Behind her, the shadows writhed in anticipation, hungry for her light as she hovered between worlds. You mustn't waver, she implored. The moment you lose hope, they will feast on your spirit. As her frail hand reached towards me, an unexpected resonation pulsed in my chest, igniting a flicker of defiance. Yet before I could grasp her fingers, the shadows exploded with a roar, swallowing her whole, while their laughter twisted into maniacal glee. In that instance, clarity dawned like a harsh light piercing through a fog. There was no escaping this reality without sacrifice. Before I could form a plan, the walls of the fast food joint trembled violently, sending me sprawling to the ground as cracks split through the tiled floor, revealing deeper horrors lurking beneath. The figure of the giant loomed larger as it advanced, the darkness from its body weaving through the cracks, tendrils darting toward me with predatory intent. Your choice is coming, little brother, it taunted mockingly. Will you join her in oblivion or claim your rightful place among us? Suddenly the once familiar squealing of the friars morphed into anguished screams, and the entire building vibrated like a living entity, thrumming with agony. The figure now towered over me, and the shadows curled and uncoiled, beckoning me into their twisted embrace. Just as I summoned the last vestige of courage to strike the knife into the ground, a chilling ensemble of voices erupted, echoing in a relentless cacophony. This is the end, or perhaps the beginning. And then, the floor gave way beneath me. I plummeted into darkness, the piecing laughter of the figures fading above as their shadows reached for me, grasping, pulling, until all I could see was the yawning mouth of a hellish void, ready to devour every shred of my essence. What awaits you is far worse than mere freedom, the giantess voice echoed as I descended, a mockery laced with finality. Here, you'll know true service. The last remnants of the world above slipped away, leaving only the haunting night, colder than death itself, slithering around me in anticipation. I felt a brutal jolt as I landed on the ground below, the impact reverberating through my bones. The darkness enveloped me again, though this time, I sensed the ground beneath had a texture, a disturbed surface that felt slick and clammy. Tentatively, I reached out, feeling the cold, damp earth seeping through my fingers. Shadows danced around me, swirling with a disquieting energy as if reveling in my disorientation. The air was thick with the acrid scent of decay, and something else, something sweet and intoxicating. I gagged, horror creeping up my throat, but before I could discern my surroundings, a series of low murmurs erupted nearby, slicing through the palpable silence. "Did you hear that?" A voice croaked. Another one. Another voice wheezed, twisted with mirth as if recalling a grotesque inside joke. "Let us show them. Let us show them what it means to serve." My heart raced, and I pushed myself upward, fumbling for the knife, now my only ally in this nightmare. The flickering light from above shone through the cracks above, casting long, haunting shadows that slithered across the soil like fingers desperately trying to escape. That I squinted into the gloom, desperation clawing at me with sharp, bony fingers. Shapes began to emerge from the dark, spectral figures consolidating in a cluster, their features melting into grotesque contortions of human semblance. They wore uniforms stained with the residues of their former lives' grease, blood, and long-abandoned hopes. "Welcome to the real late shift," one of them hissed, their eyes glowing with a phosphorescent hue. "You wanted to be free, but here, you'll understand what servitude really means." A laugh erupted, hollow and brimming with malice. Backing away slowly, I glanced around for an escape. The ground was slick with a putrid mix of substances, and the air felt thick as if it were a living entity of its own. Shadows extended towards me, claw-like tendrils writhing, eager for the feeling of flesh. Suddenly, a spark of recognition ignited my mind as I looked closer at the figures. Each of them bore a haunting familiarity. I could see the remnants of the once jovial customers who had wandered in, bags full of hope, seeking a cheap meal or a gossip-infused laugh. Now they were devoid of warmth, the liveliness snuffed from their forms, drawn into something darker. "My brother," one of them crooned, a twisted smile splitting their face. "You were chosen for something much greater than escaping. You will be a part of us, a feed for our ceaseless hunger." In a moment of dread, I realized they no longer craved the mundane, they hungered for souls. I felt the chains of their longing becoming tighter around me, swallowing me while I stood frozen between fear and recognition. Each ethereal brush against my skin felt like the claws of despair seeping into my very being. The words of the girl I met before echoed back, encouragement and warning entwined. "The moment you lose hope." Suddenly, a flurry of movement caught my eye. A new figure emerged, stumbling forward with a disoriented gaze and shadowed features. An employee, or at least, they once were. "Help me," the figure stammered, their voice thin and quaking, as if struggling against the weight of eternity. "They want to let you go. They will take you too." Before I could respond, the shimmering figures recoiled in collective annoyance, their laughter boiling over into furious howls. I was surrounded, trapped within a swirling circle of the undead, eyes glaring recklessly, words igniting with furious intensity, each one a siren-esque call drawing me closer to the brink of madness. I brandished the knife in front of me, a puny shield against the thrumming darkness. "I want to join you. I refuse to be one of your twisted flock." The shadows recoiled momentarily, their hissing intensifying like a crescendo building toward chaos. Such defiance. The one with the phosphorescent eyes cackled, stepping closer and closer, their form mingling with the shadows, each inch another tether pulling me into their web. "You'll either serve willingly, or the darkness will consume you." As my resolve faltered, I felt a momentary tug toward the knife and breathed in determination. Before I could strike, the ground beneath began to pulsate, undulating like a living thing, as the shadows surged forward with renewed ferocity. I was not alone beneath the earth, and the thought sent icy fingers clawing at my gut. Suddenly, I heard a scream, a voice piercing through the cacophony, surrounding me, the last shreds of humanity from the figure who had pleaded for help moments before, silenced as the shadows were upon them. "Join us." The figures howled in unison, the hunger in their eyes now ablaze. The shadows lashed out, and I had but a moment to react. I lunged, but the darkness embraced me, tugging me downward with a primal ferocity as claws of despair sank deeper, the chaos closing in. I was plummeting again, spiraling into a void where the whispers became a deafening roar, each syllable bellowing, "You belong to us now." Just as the darkness engulfed me entirely, a flicker of light stole through the shadowy veil, a glimpse of familiar faces, the lost souls caught in the depths of the fast food joint, their eyes pleading, reflecting desperation. And in that piercing instant before the void consumed me, I heard one final chilling whisper. The choice was never yours. Then, the world tilted, and everything went black. I awoke, not in the comforting embrace of emptiness or the crushing weight of despair, but within the confines of a cold, solid surface. The flickering light overhead cast a feeble glow, illuminating the now familiar surroundings of the fast food joint. But something was different. The noise, no, the silence felt different. A palpable tension hung in the air, thick and suffocating, layering over the smell of grease, decay, and something sweeter still that made my stomach churn. Pushing myself upright, I stumbled to my feet, naivete draining with each heartbeat. Shadows stretched across the tiles, their jerky movements reflecting the chaos within my mind. The overhead lights buzzed like an electric swarm, casting a ghostly pallor that made the place look more haunted than usual. Glancing around, the grill was dark, the fryers cold, and the cash register sat glaringly open, empty of hope. Just rows of grime-encrusted buttons gleaming like teeth from a sepulchre. It felt as if I had stepped back in time. I squinted, narrowing my eyes at the reflection staring back from the grimy window. My face was gaunt, devoid of vibrancy and echo of my prior self, lost within the depths of despair. I thought of Mark, the shadow of my sister, and all they had witnessed. The thought made the ground tremble beneath my feet. A creaking sound echoed from the back, the door to the storage room slowly swinging open to reveal the darkness inside, like a mouth waiting to bite. My instincts flared flight or fight, but curiosity compelled my feet to move forward. I had to know that as I approached, silhouettes began to gather around me, whispering and hissing, the quiet tide of memory crashing like waves against the shores of my sanity. I froze, adrenaline mingling with fear. There, just behind the door, I spotted them, figures entangled within shadow and light, wailing as they drifted closer. Faces twisted by rage and anguish, mouths gaping, their cries too familiar. "Help us! Help us!" they chanted in unison, their voices merging into a horrific chorus that churned my insides. "What do you want from me?" I demanded, voice breaking, half pleading, half enraged. Yet the question remained unanswered, drowning in a sea of whispers. Suddenly, the laughter returned, echoing through the air like shards of glass, sharp, beautiful, and unbearably painful. It was the figure in the forefront who spoke next, its face a mask of unfathomable horror, with eyes gleaming with a cunning sheen. "Nothing has changed, my dear brother. Each passing day, we draw closer until you can't tell where you end and we begin," it crooned. The shadows twirled, coiling around me, as if feeding off my fear. Desperation surged through my mind. I was trapped, but the sudden impact of realization forced me to remember. There was a choice. I could still effuse my will, to deny the darkness its seat within me. "Enough," I bellowed, steeling myself as I raised the knife, reflecting whatever cold hope remained. "You don't have to rule over me. I refuse to be part of your insatiable hunger." But with my declaration, the shadows recoiled, moving as a predator might, an eerie calm wrapping around them. I could hear the faintest whispers rippling out like a wave. "You can run all you like, but ultimately, you belong here." And it hit me hard. This was the cycle I'd fought against, but had never truly escaped. The restaurant had not been a trap of mere chaos. It was a prison, a living entity feeding on despair. Each tortured soul here, the essence of their belonging, was simply crafted to maintain this macabre reality. I trembled, facing the growing tide of darkness that I delved deeper into my memory, seeking any shred of strength bolstered by hope. "You want my despair? My fear? You'll find none here." With that, I plunged the knife into the ground, resisting the allure of the shadows. I focused on the radiant warmth of the starlight, remembering friends, laughter, the very essence of life from the world outside these cursed walls. The shadows began to undulate, recoiling as if burned by my determination. "No," they shrieked, voices rising like wildfire. "You will succumb. You'll serve us yet." But I pushed through, steel-cold resolve igniting within me. The moment I gripped the knife tightly, I felt its pulse beneath my fingers, the lifeblood of those who had come before me, a surge not of darkness but of resistance. The ground reverberated threateningly underfoot, yet rose to meet the chaos. And then, as if summoned by my willpower, a bright light burst through the heavy shadows, illuminating the dim corners of the fast food joint walls reverberating with warmth. Faces emerged, familiar ones: Mark, my sister, the lost souls of those entangled in my path. They reflected my struggles, my own journey that had connected us. "Find your truth," they whispered, an echo of encouragement that filled me anew with purpose. "You carry the light within you. Cast away the bonds they've forged." I raised my head, heart hammering as the figures started to dissolve, caught up in a maelstrom of swirling shadow. The restaurant trembled, cracking further, and for each step I took into the brilliance lingering before me, I felt the darkness retract, desperate to snuff out the hope I now clung to. In one final, defiant stand, I lunged toward the mounting glow, knife in hand, the last embers of despair sloughing off my back. I choose to break the cycle. The shadows wailed in despair as the light erupted, enveloping me whole. The air crackled, and for a moment, I felt buoyed by an exhilarating rush of clarity, a promise of freedom from the muffled, relentless servitude I had known. The blinding white consumed me, and with one last scream, "Welcome back," echoed in the distance as the darkness faded, leaving only the light a path beyond the threshold into the unknown. It ended, or so I thought. That warm glow blazed brighter, collapsing into an insatiable darkness, the laughter wrapping itself around my thoughts again. As my vision adjusted, I found myself standing in front of a new fast food sign, shining ominously in the dark, one I had never seen before, with flickering letters reading "Welcome to my shift," invitingly laced across its grotesque surface, and I realized, with a bone-chilling certainty, the cycle was far from over.